it's Jess. Thanks for joining me again on my channel. It's so good to see you. Today we're going to talk about finishing up our journals in 2025. You love it. I love it. Let's do it. Last week I talked about the 8 journal project as a way to celebrate 100 YouTube videos, even though I had several more than that. So the 8 journal project is much like my 6 journal project. No, I'll wait for you. So sorry. She always does that. Last week we discussed my 8 journal project. It is launching, I guess. Basically, it's finishing up all the journals that I started in 2025 by the end of 2025, so in December. And then, so the project will just be this video is all the first layers. Are you going to make a lot of noise again? Because I will kick you out of here. You don't have to go home, but you got to go home. I'm in this video going to show you the first layers that I've done on all the journals. This is a great way to get ideas about how to never really start with a blank page. It's also a good way to think about how to kind of put a first layer down and what you want to do with it next. Yeah, it's a good adventure in doing weird stuff. Communal journaling. So I will go through all this. There'll be some music. It's a very long video. If you've clicked into this, you've already committed to the time, or at least some of it. I'm really excited about this. I love doing this kind of processy, kind of talking about what I'm doing thing. It's my favorite. We will do that, and I think through the progress of the project, we will also I'll do lives. I've already done one that kind of is going through a couple of pages here and there and setting down second layers and third layers and finishing up pages. And I'll do journal with me journals, so you can go back and watch those if you like. I am kind of just enjoying the process, and I hope you'll enjoy the process with me. And I hope that you will find some inspiration. The theory behind doing a first layer video is working under the conception that, I don't know what I want to do in the future, but I know I have what the materials I have now are. So I'm just going to do whatever materials make me feel good. Usually it's inks. If I start with inks, I usually, even if I cover them up, I don't feel so bad because there's no texture in them. They just soak into the paper. And yeah, so ink usually has a really flat, nice background. I'm also going to do some ripped pages. I'm going to do some washi tape. I'll have paint. I'll do all kinds of different things. You'll notice by the end that I'm going to leave a lot of white pages. That's because I'll go through and do this process again as I'm journaling. So I'll be doing a page in journal for me and journal with me, and then I'll flip a couple pages back where it's all white, and I'll do another couple layers of something different that I like that I'm working with. So I leave flexibility in, but I leave myself a space to never start from zero if I don't feel like doing it that day, so that I can show up to my journal, I can do my work, and I can get that sort of creative energy flowing and out before I start a larger project. All right, so let's get into the business, all right? We're going to go into some business. What did I do? I should stop filming, and I should get to the voiceover. I'll see you in a sec. This particular shot I set up just after last video. It is my attempt to do all my journals at once. I tried that, couldn't get all of it on video, so I'm like, let's do 4 at a time. I've talked about this before, but I find it challenging to work on journals that have an existing black background. I've done 2 of them so far. So 2, no, I've done 1, and it was all using gel pens, and then I have another one that I just finished that had multiple kind of pages. So manila folder, I had some brown craft paper, which I absolutely hated and never want to work in again, and then I had black pages, and I found it to be very challenging, but I wasn't challenged enough because I was also cheating by covering it with other things. So yeah, that black journal is going to give me some problems down the line, but I'm happy with the challenge. There are my legs. There she is. This is my workstation. So I'm working on some inks right now, kind of popping in some water to spread things out. The one on the left is the back journal. The one on the the left top, and then the one on the left bottom is one of those delusions journals. It's like 9 by 12. In this grouping, I'll have two because I really do love working out of them. The top right is an Elio journal. That's just like it's a journal used mostly for used by illustrators. The paper is buttery and delightful. I love it. On the bottom right is a watercolor journal. I have a bunch of those left over for when I was working in watercolors more frequently, but I've moved away from that. However, they are still really good for multimedia projects like this, using lots of wet materials, obviously. So yeah, this one is actually kind of a big one. That one on the right top, the Elio journal, that one's kind of a big one. Also, can I tell you how distracting it is that I keep standing up and like getting up and moving and all this stuff? It's annoying. One of my favorite techniques, which you'll see throughout this entire video, is to take a piece of paper to sop up the ink or the wet leftovers on a page if I really don't feel like waiting for it to dry. Because again, remember these should be these are the first layers. These are just to combat the concept of the first layer, right? And also like the reality of the situation is that I don't um I don't always journal every day. So this is what I did over the course of a week. And sometimes my daughter helped me, sometimes the cat came in, and it gives me a way to feel like I'm going towards a larger goal, but not like in a bogged down kind of way. Like it's in a way that, I can just be wild and do whatever and not have to worry about color combinations. Even though I'm doing that here, I'm kind of not really doing that. I'm just kind of taking three different paints and seeing how I can turn them into matching somethings. Um, but yeah, so like you don't have to worry about composition, you don't have to worry about focals, you don't have to worry about color theory. You don't have to do anything. You just take stuff and you throw it down. And that to me is a good creative release, especially after, it's a good restart too. Like it's, after spending so much time doing a really detailed work or like having a little break and coming back, it's kind of good to just be doing first layers. And you may notice that I am doing a hair mask. That's why my hair is all covered in soap. But yes, so we're doing this, right? So I'll take out my dry tool and I'll do some drying and all that stuff. What you see here is me struggling with the desk space. I cannot usually do this on the desk space. Often I am doing this on the floor, which is what I'll end up switching to at the end of this sort of section. Mostly because you can't like you can't like kind of throw things around and like get physical with stuff, like move the journals around a lot or like flip them around if you need to and do many at the same time to do this kind of technique of doing three different colors, having completely different backgrounds, but having like really fun color combinations and being able to use a lot of paint at once to like kind of make a true mess. And, you know, that's a real bummer. It's a real bummer, man. So getting tied into your space is something that would happen all the time when I was at my last apartment. I pretty much only had the corner of my front room. So doing these kinds of processes meant that I had to like spread out. I didn't even have a kitchen table. I had to spread out on like the dining room table to kind of use it to just have a space for making. Yeah, so it was a big pain in the butt. So now that I have my own office, which I've never had in New York, my own office and making and creating space, I just kind of use the floor. Even though this is still kind of a small space, it's still bigger than what I was used to, but it's not as big as I need for the way that I work on stuff. I'm complaining, but it's not that bad. I don't know why I'm like saying everything about this, but I just like am looking at this and seeing how much I'm struggling with how much stuff that keeps falling and I'm trying to like be all Picasso and like blah 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 and it's not working out. Yeah. I mean, there's something too about being able to spread out everywhere with all your materials and not like have to do too much work. We love that. I'm going on and on. But what you're seeing me do here is playing with paint and ink layers and not really marrying myself to anything, like kind of just taking things that I like, using my finger if I need to, uh, just, you know, winging it. In my last video, I did show you each section of journals that I hadn't, each section of the journals that I'd already done pages in. You'll start to see those as I flip pages. I really wanted to take some time on these 4 backgrounds to kind of have pages that sort of matched that I could come upon in different parts of my journal journey and, you know, figure out different ways to work on them based on different mindsets. My plan is to take that video, and these are the same journals on the right, and kind of do a before and after to see what it looks like. So here I am on the floor. Finally, common sense. This is the next day. Like I said, I just kind of did a little bit at a time. That's my daughter showing. She's saying something. I don't know what she's saying. But she's showing you what she likes. You'll see her little feet and her little hands in here. What she loved to do during this section is she would take, and I found this to be genius, and you'll see this later in the video, but she would take wipes and she would soak them with ink that I didn't really care about. It was ink that, you know, would eventually have gone bad if she hadn't been playing with it. And she soaked them with ink, and then she would put them on the pages so that the pages would have this really interesting texture and mix of colors. And I loved that, to the point where she had made a bunch and she dried them. And then I put them on all my journals and just soaked all the ink out of them, and the patterns were amazing. Then she got mad at me for taking her pretty artworks and soaking all the ink out of them. She got really upset. And I felt bad later. So then I let her make a whole another set of them. That's the thing. Like, if you have a kid, you just kind of like, you know, it can be frustrating when they come in and want to play with you, but it's either like you get upset and you stop doing art, or you just keep doing art and like keep that zen and bring them into the zen with you. It's not always easy. I'm making it sound easy. It's not easy because you got the OCD, so I want materials used in a certain way, but you know what? It's fine. What's going to happen? She made a huge mess. She did do that, but I make a huge mess, so it's not a big deal. I'm the one who ended up dumping a whole jar of glue on the ground. So, and then like part of the carpet here is like all crazy. That's the ink she mixed. I was just showing you what she had done in that journal. The journal she's working in is actually one of the smaller journals that I'm working with as well. I'm laughing because in my mind, I can hear myself being like, do whatever you want. Yeah. Oh, look at that cool thing. Or being like, don't put your toes in my shot, even though my feet are totally in this shot right now. Or, hey, 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 chill, chill, which is like something I have to say to my kid all the time. Hey, yo, just chill. Because she's a rambunctious and delightful human being that we all love. I do a little music, a little voice break for you, and then we'll be back. can see I'm doing a little bit of stencil work here. I ended up through this entire process not using a lot of stencils. I don't know why. Sometimes I'll love them, other times I'm like, eh. I really loved using the black marker and making black marks to kind of go over. Yeah, so I'm transitioning to another thing. This is what I was talking about. These are the ink papers that I got in trouble for using by my daughter. They are ink soaked baby wipes. So I'm just laying them down random places, the most inky, the least inky, just kind of see where everything went. She favored the purple and the blue combination, so there was not a lot of green to choose from, and they were all kind of like poopy colored, like that one on the top right. What you're going to see me do next is like spray these with water, and then I'm going to leave them to soak for a little while. As I was doing this, I realized that everything wasn't getting wet quick enough to actually like make it sap out all the color. So I'm just going to pour everything out. This isn't all six, you know, this is all 6 of them. So I closed that one just to see how it would go. I'm going to do some pouring. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. I know how it turns out, but I don't remember. Okay, I don't know how it turns out. I don't remember. Oh yeah, and she had this pan full of dried ink, so I was like, I'll re-wet it and I'll use that just to get rid of it. Here we are again. I got my gloves on. Those are the patterns that came up. I really noticed that everything was still soaked, so ooh, that one came out good. I remember that one. I've seen that one. Just trying to get all of the ink out. This is a fun thing to do with your kid too. Like you can even spray the inks onto the paper, and while it's like the wipe is still wet, and it comes out really cool. It just filters its way through paper, and you can kind of move everything around. You can see the paper marks there on the right. Yeah, a lot of things can be done with these kinds of things. What are we going to do here? Oh, and then maybe try to wipe that. Yeah, okay. What we got here, bud? Nope, you messed it up. Oh, you messed it up. Oh, we love to see it. Alrighty, well, tell me if you made it this far and if this is a technique you might use in the future. If you made it this far and you're like wanting to say hello, I just guess leave like a pencil or something emoji, or a I love ink in sentence form. All right, let's do a verbal break. We'll do a voice break, and then I'll come back and say goodbye at the end. Okay, love you. Yay! Thanks everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed all of the music selections that I made. They're from the audio library on YouTube. It's a group called The Grey Room. I really like them. I think they do an excellent job. Yeah. Hope it was a totally chill time and that you enjoyed watching me kind of play around with paper and inks and paints. You know, and I hope in the next section, when I'm doing more sort of detailed work, we can get into the conversations about where these things end up going and how I approach things and that kind of stuff. This was just a wild video with a wild time. I hope that you made it through the whole hour. And if you didn't, if you just made it through 5 minutes, I still love you anyway. I still love you. And this, I'm realizing, is how I spilt an entire container of glue exactly in that spot and then found it the next day. Jessica. Alrighty. Everybody have a great day. I love you. Bye.